Well, thanks for being here. So this is a real privilege. This is a new kind of setup for us. I mean, we sort of tried it out a little bit last time, where we did have somebody who was a mentee of another person as our part of our last panel. So we had a little taste of it, but this is going to be really unique for us in being able to hear what it's like from the faculty perspective and then also from the student perspective. Thank you so much for being a part of this. We are filming because there are a bunch of people who said, I can't make it, but I really wish I could. Are you going to film? So we'll do it, and and hopefully many more will benefit from this.
They're just watching us eat here.
I know.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I'll edit out, drooling or whatever, so don't worry. Let's see. I guess let's start with you two. First of all, I think this is such a vital thing. You brought it up, actually, Cahill. Why don't we ever deal with studio teaching? But in talking about it, I started to realize that a lot of us do one-on-one instruction. I mean, College of Ed, you're doing it, School of Ed, you're doing it all the time, right? And so we get to hear about your perspective. There are a lot of people, even in the classroom setting, who will make time to meet with students one-on-one. I mean, most of us do, I think. And if you're like me, you've got a line of students outside your office most of the time.
At all times.
Yeah, or at all times. And so we find it really helpful to, especially where there's some particular issue or a real giftedness, to do some one-on-one time. But all of us have our office hours, and so I think pretty much to a person, everybody's doing this. Of course, you guys doing Hub are involved one-on-one, as we've just mentioned. So this is something that a lot of us share. But the wonderful thing about just focusing in on one-on-one instruction is that we get to think about what our goals are, because it's not about active engagement. You're already engaged. It's not going to be a problem when you're one-on-one. But you do need to figure out what it is that you really want to see happen for that student. You want to set goals together that are meaningful, and then be able to track that and have a feedback loop. So the focus today is on establishing those goals and primarily on the feedback loop. Being able to give good criticism, helpful criticism, and I don't know about you all, but we tend to emphasize how to safely say it or to gently say it. But I think in my experience, it's the relationship of the one-on-one that allows me to take things that otherwise would be very difficult things to hear. So I think the relationship aspect opens up the possibility of talking about some pretty cutting and deep issues that could be painful, but they're in a context of growth, and that makes all the difference. So we do want to talk about the context, having the vision for where you want to go, but then we want to talk about how do you assess, and then how do you communicate that assessment, and then if it truly is a feedback loop, there has to be some way to chart it out and say, yes, we are making progress toward this shared goal, or not. So what are we going to do? And all that's front and center when you're dealing with one-on-one instruction. It can get sort of buried under bigger goals for this amorphous body of people, but here you're talking about an individual that you care about. That should be the core of what we do, right? No matter what the scale, no matter how many people are involved, we do want to have goals that are meaningful for each student, and we want to assess, communicate that, and then grow from it. Let's start with you, Cael. Everything I know about you is just glowing. I mean, if every word I'm about to speak, you need to have like a halo around it or something, because your students love your teaching. And I know that you invest. You invest by going. I mean, you go to that maybe conference too. But I'm thinking of competitions and encouraging your students to do all sorts of things. And so you're doing dinner with them. You really do create a studio that's cohesive because you're involved with each person, I believe. So, what do you want to share about your practice?
Yeah, I can share a little bit, but I don't promise it will have any profound impact, because I'm a young teacher. I'm still figuring out how all of that works. Piano teaching I think really presents a lot of challenges because it is so direct, and it's almost different than other kinds of music teaching, because a pianist, they're literally responsible for every part of the musical texture, and therefore the criticism of what they're doing has much more potential, I think, to cut deeply, because in an ensemble setting, you know, if you're like, sopranos, you know, it balances too much, then it's about their relationship to the whole. Whereas the pianists, they do everything on their own. So there's not, it's why it is so nerve-wracking on stage too, because everything is up to you. It's, you know, one of those few instruments that can, you know, control the whole show at once. So it really is very hard for criticism. It's something I've struggled with as a student and still struggle with as a teacher. We tend to teach the way that we were taught, but actually I had some bad experiences the way I was taught. Not that any of my teachers didn't care for me deeply, but it was, you know, there was a big effort on my part to try to perceive their caring for me despite the criticism. And what I always wanted to do was to try to make sure that my caring for them is clear through the criticism, not despite it. And so, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of Russian piano teachers that were pretty, Jason knows a lot about this. Probably just a lot of pianists in the room. So, you know, it was a strategy to make you feel incompetent or to make you feel kind of worthless in order to help you improve. And it's a weird thing because I don't believe my teachers meant it at all malicious. And that was just the way they were taught, and that's how they passed it on. You know, it will help, you know, build his nerves and his resilience for the stage. But I have never wanted to or been able to teach that way, so it's really hard to find just the right formula, like you were mentioning, not coddling a student, but also giving really deeply needed feedback that they can take and then do something with. So yeah, like I said, I'm still figuring out what to do. There are a few things that I've kind of, I'm going to be revealing some secrets to Courtney here. You're not supposed to share this with anyone else, but some things I tried to do in every lesson with a student and giving them feedback. And this is a little bit different in an arts or creative product sort of criticism than it is maybe in academic or education. But I think that a lot of the process is really similar. So the first one is that as the student really progresses with their knowledge in the field, at the same time proportionately increases their sensitivity to criticism, because they have invested so much time into it and so much of their blood, sweat, and tears into the creative product, that when you criticize the creative product, you're criticizing a big part of them and a big part of what they did. And so it's just really funny because a couple days ago I just gave a presentation to a bunch of piano teachers in Utah about this subject, and so I did bring a little slide for something that I use. I don't know if you can all see it here, but this is something that I got from a dancer, a teaching of dance a long time ago, which is funny because you're a dancer. But we've never talked about this before. This is, So I actually started using this for studio class settings when you're in a group of students that are also giving feedback to the student. But it's something I try to do in lessons too. And it's kind of following a 4-step process or 4 stages. That tries to first open up the student to criticism, and then to put it in a way that really helps them, so they, because you know what it's like. I mean, you start to criticize and the walls come up, right? And then it's the defense mechanisms are, I don't want to do this anyways because it's not cool, because I can't do it, or you don't know what you're talking about, so I don't need to listen to you. And so we want to try to avoid both of those things. And it goes kind of like in 4 stages, but those stages can absolutely overlap. For me, the first one is just giving some neutral or positive statements of meaning, not just, oh, that was really nice, which happens all the time in piano seminar. The way I kind of learned, I guess, in college to give criticism was the compliment sandwich, which was like, you say something nice, and then you say something not nice, and then you say something nice again. But that just ends up turning into, oh, that was really good. This was terrible, but it was really nice. That happens so much in piano seminar, right? And we're trying to work with the students on giving that kind of feedback. But it starts with some sort of neutral or positive statement of meaning about the general task that they're doing. And it shouldn't just be I enjoyed that. It should be something specific or something positive. And maybe you're thinking back about your lessons now. I don't always do this, but so then after that, what I find opens up the student a little bit better if they're really caring about improving and what it is that they're doing is asking them questions about what they just did or about the assignment or what it is that they just turned in. So for them to ask you questions first, it's actually the best way to open up the criticism. So what is it that you're concerned about? What are you worried about in this context? What things are you working on right now to improve in this? It's probably not everything. It's probably one specific thing. So for us, that might be an example. Like Courtnee say, well, what do you think about my articulation of this fugue subject? I'm not sure I'm getting all of these notes consistently short or something. So I said, okay, yeah, then. Third step would be for the teacher or the person criticizing to give response to those questions and to stay on task. And I struggle with that for a long time because, as you know, what the student has in mind that might be their struggle area is not at all usually the most important thing. They may be thinking way over here in left field, and you're thinking, actually, you have a million wrong notes on page 2, and that's what I really want to launch into right now. But that doesn't necessarily help the student to be open to the criticism at first. You want to kind of open their shell before you can really have an effect. So it's staying on task for me and responding to their actual concerns first has been something I'm still trying to work on. But so statements of meaning, the student or the person who's receiving the criticism asks questions about their performance or their assignment. And the third one is giving a response that stays on topic to that. And then the fourth stage is when you really can ask them some questions. And that's also something I struggle with, is asking them questions that don't have the answer in the question already. So, were you intending to play this completely out of Baroque style? Or, that's is that an interpretive choice? You want to try. It's really hard to make those questions neutral, but it's worth it because it doesn't let them already know. As soon as they know that, you're coming down on them about something, then the shell starts. But to get them just thinking in a neutral way about some of those issues, to know that you're thinking in detail. Once that process has happened, they're usually a little more open to criticism about the other things that you're thinking. So that's when I'll launch into what I call permissioned feedback, because they have then, by that process of walking through them asking questions, you asking questions, then you're ready to, and hopefully they've developed some trust. They know you're not just there to hurt them or to launch into them, but they're open to receive that feedback. You can watch some much better presentations about this. The lady that sells this thing, her name is Liz Lerman, and I found a lot of the ideas really convincing, but I try to use it in piano teaching. You don't know about all this stuff. Because it can be so personal in a one-on-one setting, and it really can be, it's very easy to take it the wrong way. And if my students don't know that I care about them through the way I'm criticizing them, then even if I do care, it's not enough. They have to really know that, and if they don't, then I didn't do my job well. So that's a lot of blah, 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 but that's kind of some of the things I do in the studio teaching.
Striking that you didn't have anywhere where you just comment. It's all questions.
Well, there are definitely comments, right?
At some point.
At some point,
let's try again.
But that changes a lot, too, as you get to know a student, too. Like, I mean, especially when you're developing that trust early on, even if it takes more time, saves time in the future. Because now I know when I have a lesson with Courtnee, if she's got a jury or something coming up, and I know that I can cut to the chase because of some other, and this is the same with advising or one-on-one meetings with students. If you've had those kind of interactions first, she knows, or I hope she knows, that when I just lied into her about her Beethoven sonata, that it's never at all because I enjoy criticizing her. My favorite thing is to just be a cheerleader for her, but she knows that it's because I'm really trying to save time or cut to the chase. And she has had to endure a lot of my very direct, blunt comments, so sorry, Courtnee.
No, it's been great.
So Courtnee, do you want to describe how it's easiest for you to
Sure.
to get comments that help you grow?
Yeah. I was just laughing when Dr. Smith was talking because I was thinking about so many different things. But I think, and I know a lot of things that I'll say probably will not be representative of all, personalities, but in my instance, and most musicians, I think, are quite critical of themselves. And so I appreciate that when I go into my lessons, like last week, and I started the lesson with, I'm doing a terrible job, I can't do this, everything sounds terrible, my fingers will not do what I want them to do, all this stuff. Dr. Smith said, okay, no, that's not allowed, you can't start that way. So that, I know it sounds, even to me it sounds kind of silly, but helping me change my thoughts more towards just positive self-talk is helpful in not just getting stuck in and being able to actually move forward and make progress. So I definitely appreciate that, and I think for me too personally, Dr. Smith has helped me over the last few years learn to appreciate and accept and enjoy the process of becoming a better musician and not just focusing on some arrival point. And he's done that in a multitude of ways, but I think specifically of my teacher back home. She is Romanian, and she's...
We had probably some similar background.
Yes,
yeah.
very, very similar. I mean, she is just like as rude can be. She's crazy. She's actually crazy. But
She may be watching.
She knows that. She knows that.
She gave you a great gift, though.
Yes, she's wonderful. I'm very thankful for her. And I love to go back and take lessons from her when I'm home. But she would often give me pieces and upon first giving it to me say, okay, so here's what I want you to work on. I performed this for an audience of 5,000 when I was 12. Good luck, you're behind. You should be like 10 years ahead of this. Literally, she would say that to me. And Dr. Smith has never done that to me. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that because the way that Dr. Smith teaches and encourages and criticizes is in a way that where his comments are so much more directed, and here's the progress that I've seen in a week, here's the progress that I've seen in a month, here's the progress that I've seen in the past year, and you should be thankful for that, and you should acknowledge that, as opposed to what I've been used to, which is just none of that whatsoever. So I'm not sure if there's anything else that you want me to really
That's good. That's all good. Yeah.
speak about, but
Do you all have questions? I want to make sure we ask questions now before we get on to another pair, just so that we don't forget.
I can say too, I mean, there have been quite a few times, granted I am a very emotional person, but that I've just lost it in lessons, just definitely started crying, because it's just kind of really hard, and I wish that progress is much faster than it goes usually for me, but all of that is tempered and aided and helped when Dr. Smith criticizes, like he was saying, and I think I can't even say criticizes without saying encourage at the same time, because it's like it's one and the same, which I think that's impressive. So I think that's cool.
Thank you. You're so obviously
Yeah.
Courtney's very self-aware, and actually well, in the whole scheme of piano students, you don't break down very often. Pianists are very, very fragile and self-critical people, and you're very resilient, actually. But those Yeah, it is always a challenge, and every student's a little bit different. For pianists, especially for an adult, learning new motor skills, learning new independence is one of the most frustrating, humiliating things. But it's especially because the process is so slow. And actually, in that context, Courtney and I are exactly the same. After age 11, the brain starts to fossilize, pair off those connections, and it's harder to. It's the process of an adult learning new motor skills is very different than a child.
Yeah.
So I find myself practicing and learning, doing the same things she's doing, just maybe a different task. And one way that we use to try to show, I don't hear her practice every day. I see her, with intervals of time, and I can see big changes that she can't see. And one thing that really helps pianists, and I don't know what this looks like in an education setting, is recordings.
Yes.
It is a snapshot that the student can then go back and look, and I hope that you look at something that you played a year ago, and it's not that you say that it was so bad, right? Because that's the initial reaction, but it's like, look at what's different from how you play now, and even just the things that you notice. So the recordings really help us a lot too. I don't know how useful that is in an academic setting to see, but definitely in one-on-one teaching, that's been really important, because the student has to trust what you're saying, and that's probably the easiest way to just prove to them that something is changing, something is improving.
I hadn't thought about that, but having a recorded record, you've got a record of progress then, which is really helpful. I love the fact that you're teaching process, love of the process, and not just some outcome, because where we live is getting there. It's gaining skills for a lifetime, hopefully, and you're not going to just run after the next thing. You have to love the practice of it, or you're not going to do the practice that's necessary for that thing. It's unsustainable, I believe, long term, unless you just find a way to love the daily practice of getting better at your art, whatever that is. If it's any.
That was a huge switch that I had to make. When I kind of ran out of sort of talent and just had to really start buckle down and practicing, and then it was miserable for a while, and then I started, like you said, it's just fascination in the actual process. And that is something that I know that even if Courtney has nothing to do with piano, and 4 years from now, that those are skills, and you're pretty unique this way, I'd say. You really do enjoy the process a lot. She's constantly texting me, like, how do I finger this passage? Like, what was it?
Which she's so gracious to respond to me when he doesn't have to.
Anyways, that love for the process of, that's all that we're trying to do. And even if she completely switches, maybe you go into engineering or software or something like that. I have no idea. You're brilliant. You can do anything. And the love of that process and of understanding that not being able to see my little improvements here actually turns into something great over time. That's what I hope that they all learn, even if they don't stay in music.
I think one thing too that I was thinking of when he was just speaking was kind of the oscillation back and forth between really particular and specific issues that arise musically and technically, switching between that and just big picture sort of things also is useful, and not becoming too focused on one issue. And so when I think about how the way in which I've improved my craft over the last 2 years, really, it's because he's taught me how to practice. That's actually the reason why. It's because I just didn't know how to practice before. I had some good practice habits and a lot of really bad practice habits. So, the big picture.
I'm still learning how to practice.
Yeah, that's the whole thing, which is a very big picture concept. But then, yes, when you get in lessons, obviously you have to say, no, that was staccato and it's not supposed to be, those kind of things. But
that's great. Thank you, guys. So I'm going to shift this around here so we can, thank you, so we can see Brandon better. So Shane, you have a new position coming up here. 2020, you're becoming director of, what is this thing you're doing now? You have a new position.
Yes, July 1st of next year.
July, okay.
So I'll be the new director of teacher education,
education.
licensure certification. So Ashley Smith is retiring, and so I will be transitioning into that role July 1st of next year.
You're doing a lot of ed TPA stuff, but
yes.
as a school, you have seen that you want to improve your feedback in certain ways,
Sure,
right?
absolutely,
So can you give us a little background?
Sure. I think the easiest thing would be to say thank you to Cahill and Courtney for doing such a great job presenting for us. And Brandon, I say ditto and any questions. Because what I don't think Austin realizes, even right now, as I'm sitting here listening to you guys going, everything that you said literally is exactly what we would have talked about. The relationship between teaching individual learners about their craft is exactly what we have to do in the classroom. I think that's a beauty of, you think about a performer on a stage. Well, guess what? Brandon performs every day in front of a classroom. Because the reality is, all eyes go to who? The teacher. Now, we know students are supposed to be learning. Absolutely. We get that. But really, we are the sage on the stage. And so we are the ones that people are going to look at to say, have you done your practice time? Have you done all the things you need to do beforehand? So that feedback understanding, I think, is such an important piece of what we do. I think overall for us, it's been for the College of Ed, has been an ongoing process of understanding this relationship piece that you talked about, is starting early and often is feedback. We start feedback with students in 199. That's their freshman course or possibly sophomore course. So they literally start that year with we talk about dispositional things, and for the next 3 years of your program, you're going to have opportunities for someone in the College of Ed to give you feedback. One of the things that we also figured out was how we could get our students to see what we were doing for them, but then transfer that information to their own students when they were teaching. They were listening, they were comprehending, they were doing the things we were asking them to do as far as feedback. But then the question became, they've got another leg of that because they have to do that every day in the classroom. They've got the students lining up outside their office door. They've got the students who they've got to have that opportunity to be able to come back and say, what does this need to look like for them? So we were seeing that was a difficult transition for some of our students. So in the last couple semesters, especially with EdTPA, those of you who don't know about it, EdTPA, one of the big pieces about tasks they have to do is providing students feedback on assessments, all right? And so what in the world does that look like? Because again, we think 100% means I gave you all the feedback you need. Well, I don't know if you know that, but that tells me nothing about where I am as a student in that assessment by giving me a 100. It tells me I got them all right, but that tells me nothing outside of that as what I'm doing as an individual learner. So we said, what do we do with that? Okay, well that helps to say we need to do something different on our part from the College of Ed standpoint to say, are we giving students the feedback that they need that they can easily transfer to their own students? Are we teaching them in ways when we give them feedback that's actually usable, that really hones in on strengths, that really talks about areas for improvement, but also gives them goals in which they can then take that information and move forward with it? Because if I give you feedback and I just talk about all the things that you did wrong, but then I also tell you, well, here's something you should do better next time. But then I never actually give you a plan about how I think you should do that better next time. Guess what? You are never going to do that any better the next time around. Okay? I need to be very specific about that for those students. I need to have, in a sense of what we taught our kids was, it's a Reteach Plan. So in assessment, your feedback should be so explicit that someone else could walk into a classroom, grab a student's paper, and literally reteach the lesson based on the feedback that you gave the student. It's that explicit.
Wow.
That explicit. It is not just you did really well, right? Right, yeah. So that, but
could come back and do it.
right. So that's kind of the thought process we've had over the years has been. I think we've been doing that well in the College of Ed. We just haven't been talking to our students specifically about how does this then translate into your own teaching. I do say that, little side note, little plug for our group here who just passed EdTPA was this EdTPA.
I mean, like you said, there's plenty of opportunities, like from freshman year when I took 199. Luckily, I had Jason Robinson as my 199 teacher, and he, like Dr. Brown said, built that relationship very early on, so it was easy for me to accept helpful criticism from him, even if he was, and he can be blunt sometimes, but it was easier to accept that, like, since I built that strong relationship with him early on. And then there are like the plenty of opportunities like getting observed by either Dr. Brown or my supervisor, Ms. Myers. And methods, there were probably about 4 or 5 observations on lessons that I would teach. Let me tell you, from that first lesson I taught on colonial America, I think it was, to where I am now is like, looking back, it's extraordinary. Just from the feedback that they provided to me. I mean, and being teachers of teachers, like, they're probably the most qualified to give feedback. So I
Were
really
these recorded or were they handwritten notes?
handwritten, yeah.
Okay.
So the supervisor would come in, watch me teach the lesson. There was a rubric that she would fill out, they would fill out. There were spaces to make notes, and then after I would teach that lesson, they would pull me to the side, like step out of the classroom, and just have a conversation, like go through it with me, so I could see like what areas I was struggling in, what areas I did very well in, and then kind of, like they said earlier, like talking about a plan, like to move forward. Like, okay, like these are things you can fix, like like suggestions, like you could try this next time, or be a little more engaging, like grab their attention. It would just vary like time to time. But even looking back on it, at my previous placement this semester for student teaching, I mean, if you know education, learning targets, like saying the learning targets are like the biggest deal in the world. Like, so the students know what they're learning about. I can do this. I can use multiplication to find an area, whatever. And I'm in my first placement in student teaching, and I get observed by my supervisor. And apparently, I didn't say the learning target. And she told me that afterwards, and I was shocked. I was like, are you serious? Like, it's in my DNA at this point, you know? Like, I say the learning target at the start, middle, end of each lesson, so they know, like, the framework of, like, what they're trying to learn. I was like, are you sure I didn't say it? She's like, I'm positive you didn't say it. I was like, so even, like, saying that, like, how they've helped us grow, like, we can still mess up. We can still make mistakes. We're human. But it's interesting to see, like, how far I've come, and now I can take all of this I've learned and apply it into my students. And at this second placement I'm in, and I graduate in 36 days, I feel like the most prepared than I ever have. Yeah, I'm not counting down at all. Bargain on the counter. But this is definitely the most prepared I've felt to step into my own classroom after graduation than like ever before. Like even the way, like I said, the kind of feedback sandwich, positive, negative, positive, I use that every single day with my students. Even on like, not even like on a test, even if it's just like a small assignment they're working on. They have a question, I'm like, well, you did good right here. And then I'll explain the negative where they're struggling. And I think it's mostly about that relationship, like keeping their spirits up, because especially for these third graders I have right now, they're phenomenal in math, but their reading language arts, they're a little low, and you can just see the frustration every time they come upon something that they just have no idea how to figure out. So I think it's really important to like come alongside them instead of like wagging my finger in their face, you're not doing this right. And that's exactly what they did for me during methods last semester. Because I think I had taught like 2, maybe 3 lessons and been observed, and I did good, you know, like first time stepping into a classroom, it's nerve-wracking. I don't know why. Like the college presentation, I'm fine.
Every day.
But 7, 8, 9-year-olds, I'm sweating bullets. I don't know why. But it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks into my methods semester, and I kind of just lost my drive, like my motivation. I was like putting way too much pressure on myself to like feel like I had to succeed, I had to be perfect, which is unreasonable. And that made my lessons suffer for probably about 2 weeks in a row. Like the preparation was not there, the motivation was not there, it wasn't engaging. And then luckily they called me in. So I had a meeting with Dr. Brown, Dr. Anderson, my supervisor, and it was, I call it a heart-to-heart / like, get your stuff together. Because that's how it went from start to finish. It went from, like I said, coming alongside that, because that's what I felt like they did. I don't think a teacher's job is to, like, wave their finger in your face, telling you everything you did wrong, and expecting you to take that and improve on it. They really were so encouraging, come alongside me. Like we said, positive, negative, positive. They said everything that they thought I was doing great at. Told me the areas I need to fix, my motivation, my preparation, all that. And then wrapping it up with another positive. And just kind of encouraging me and letting me know I had the ability, because they see those positives in my teaching. So they know I had the ability. It was just believing in myself, I guess, knowing that I could do it.
So it was kind of like they were looking at your track record and saying,
Yes.
this is the kind of person you are, and then envisioning the future instead of saying, look what you've done and living there, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was very uplifting. And then at the same time, they said, like, with each observation that they come, by this next time, we expect to see a massive difference. Because if not, then this isn't for you. And that was very,
wow.
I mean,
Wake
tears,
you up.
tissues. I was like,
exactly,
I was
yeah.
a mess.
Yeah.
But that was very hard to hear, but I was like, okay, this is what I have to do. This is the game plan. So I took that and did a lot better the next time. So I'm about to graduate, so it worked out.
Not all students respond that way.
Exactly
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Which is when Nelson and I talked, I said, Brandon's the perfect candidate for this because he did exactly what we want students to do. He literally understood our relationship with him, and he took that, and that was his first filter for our conversation, was our relationship with him. His second filter was the stuff he was hearing that was hard to hear. And then his third filter was, okay, now what do I need to do with this? How do I need to improve on that? And so he stood there with an idea to say, either I'm gonna do better at this or I'm not. And he did. He did exactly what we hoped and prayed he was gonna do, and turned it around. And you got teachers saying we absolutely adored him, which we knew they would because we did in the beginning. That's why we called him in and talked to him, and had those conversations. So, but you're right, not every student responds in that manner.
What a powerful piece for you to have, Brandon, with your own students
Yeah,
through the course of your career.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Invaluable.
It'll just keep getting harder. Don't
Yes.
stop.
Right, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
It's just a choice at the end.
I love the idea you talked about recording. So that is also something else we're working on with our students. At TPA does require them to video themselves. And that is hard for students,
Very
especially
hard to
teaching.
watch.
Anyone, right? Hard to hear yourself on the radio. It's hard to hear yourself. So we thought, we've got dynamite teachers, but for some reason you put a camera in front of them and they become blubbering messes.
Oh, yeah.
And we didn't get it. We didn't understand.
So
And it
true.
went, oh no, we've got to work on that. So instead of making it, okay, now we're doing this for the test, it became another goal for us where students are having to film themselves now in Clinical 1 for a reflection exercise. So it's about improvement, but it's about reflection. So they have to film 2 different lessons, and they have to get a friend to reflect with them. Then they have to get a supervisor to reflect with them and talk about that. Number one, of course, it gets them prepared, but it also talks a lot about, okay, if you're really going to be honest with yourself, what are some things that you really did well in this lesson? What really bombed? You've got to be willing to do that every day. You're not going to record yourself every day that you teach, but if you don't have that cycle constantly as a reflective teacher, you're never going to get any better at your craft, ever. So it's a daily thing for them to be able to do that. So it's just another piece to add to that, to say, yes, it's given us a benefit too, but it's also beneficial for them to be able to see those pieces as well.
And I will say for methods, having us do a mini
Right.
TPA was so helpful.
Sure.
Now, like I said, when we turned it in, I got it back and it was just slashed with pen marks. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it was very helpful because I passed. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's our time to provide feedback.
No.
Yeah, it's just like
So-
when you perform, you do want to be in the venue.
Yeah.
You want to envision what it's going to really be like when you're out
Absolutely.
there doing your
Yeah,
thing. And
absolutely.
It's
so
scary.
that's what you want to do. You want to
Absolutely.
experience it ahead
You
of time.
do.
Train for the thing, not for
Yes.
something else.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
So
really
for
good.
any of the other like studio teachers that are watching this, I for a very long time did this awfully complex process of like recording every lesson, taking the camera card out, putting it in my computer, downloading the file, putting it on Dropbox or a file share, sending it to the student. They would download it, then they'd watch it, and then after like 3 weeks, none of us have any room left on our computers. So I started